Alright, hey guys, so it's Aelx here, and today is a pretty awesome day. I hit 10,000 subscribers. Thank you guys so much for that. It means a lot, and I don't know, you guys have been with me for a long time. It's been 2 whole years, and we finally hit this huge, mark, and it's just insane. I never expected to get this far. And I promised a lot of you guys that I'd be telling you guys my life story when I hit 10,000 subscribers. Some of you guys, I said I would do a draw of my life, and as time kept going, I kept telling maybe I might not do one and I might do some other style. And I decided that I wouldn't do a draw of my life. I felt like it'd be way too hard on myself. I started trying it a bit, and it was too much drawing, and I just could not finish it. It was really tough for me to draw some parts because I didn't know how to draw it, and I felt really uncomfortable drawing it. So I decided not to, so please understand that. And we're just gonna get right on to my story. So get some popcorn, get some water. This is gonna be a long thing. So my life story. I guess I could start from when I was born, because I'm a weirdo. I'm gonna start it. Okay, so the reason why I'm going to start with when I was born is because I have a cousin who was born. He's one of my closest friends, just 2 weeks after me. He's a pretty cool dude. Been friends with him, childhood friend, ever since I was born. And so let's just skip a bit. So on to my life. As I was growing up, I lived with my dad and mother. My dad was always working. He kept going out of town. My mother would kind of care for me, but not really. She'd care for me every now and then put me in what are they called? Where you get not a babysitter, but just someone just watches you forever. I guess that's a babysitter. So, yeah, those places where parents can just put their children and the children just stay there forever. So I never really got to see my mother that much, but every now and then I would. And as I was growing up, life was pretty good. It was going pretty nice. Everything's chill. I've had a couple pretty cool incidents. I probably had my first kiss around, what was it? I think it was first grade? I think it was first grade. When we were doing a play, Romeo and Juliet. I was Romeo, and I actually did kiss Juliet. It wasn't like a crazy kiss. It was like a quick little kiss. I think it was on the cheek or something. I don't know if that counts either, but yeah, something like that. Those were fun times. And eventually it hit an age where I was still really young. I believe I was 7. I'm not sure, it's maybe 7 or 8, where I started to see around my house my parents were arguing, and I was very confused. I was wondering what was going on. I saw them arguing every now and then eventually this was the only argument I ever remembered. Was we were in our basement, so where the place I stream every night. It was near the basement, near to a picture of me, in which I saw my parents just downright straight up arguing the heck out of each other, and I had no idea why. I'm gonna explain why later, because I actually have found out why they argue, but I'll just fill you guys in eventually. But I was so confused. I was why are they arguing? Isn't my mother kind of nice? Because I never really saw her that much, but she was there in my life, and then my dad was just arguing with them, and I never really got to see him that much either, because he was usually out working. And they were just arguing, and apparently they were arguing for the custody of me, and I was just what the heck what's going on? Why are they divorcing? And I have no idea why. So eventually they got divorced, and in court, juries and stuff, when both parents want to take custody of the child, it's very not fair. It's usually the mother will always win and take care of the child, and in the first trial she won. And I was okay, I left my dad, told him my goodbyes, hugged him, everything, lived with my mother in California, in Fresno. And that's when I started doing. So when I was in Fresno, I grew up, elementary school was okay. During elementary school, 2nd, 3rd grade or so, it was very interesting. There were a couple events that I do remember. One of the events was that I remember that there was this guy, and I don't know what was his problem or what happened, but I was just talking to these 2 girls, and apparently during class, he said we're gonna meet up at lunch and I'm gonna beat you up. And I'm like, huh? I don't even know where it came from. He said he was like, it was similar to that. I can't remember the exact words, but he was just like, yeah, I'm gonna beat you up. I'm like, huh? Okay, at lunch? And I'm like, okay, whatever. I just kind of said, I was just chill about it. I was like, yeah, right, dude. Like, this guy's gonna beat me up. And during lunch, all I remember was I was just hanging with a couple of my friends, and all of a sudden I saw him and then a group of people, and I'm like, oh god, what the heck's going on? And we never really fought. It was more of a chase down. Like, it was legit. I was running and they were just chasing me, and then the teachers eventually stopped it. And then I remember throughout the day, after one period or whatever, I don't even know, during math time or whatever, I got called to the principal's office for some odd reason. And I do not exactly remember what I even told him. I just remember that I told him that these guys were trying to beat me up, and then some things happened. I can't remember too well. I told my mother about it afterwards, and she didn't really care, so it was just like, whatever. I didn't get bruised or anything. It was just a weird, awkward day of a chase down. It wasn't even a fight, it was just a chase down. So yeah, there's that. And then, well, also, like, my grades in elementary were pretty trash. They were horrific. And throughout the whole years, I visited, just besides that incident I visited my father every now and then. Every time on vacation, I'd go with him, and I still remember just being with him. Also, before I forget, for the jury court, even though my mother won, I also get to live with my father for a couple of times, like for a couple weeks or so, and then I go back with her. And the times I remember living with my dad was it was just me and him. That's all we had. We lived on ramen noodles, and we went out every now and then, but we were just kind of like, what are we doing with our lives, And a little perspective on my dad is that when he escaped from the Vietnam War when he was around 10 years old, so he's probably still scared for his life. He doesn't know what to do. He's still learning. He's gone through a lot of things. He's told me a lot of stories. He smoked a bit, he's done some really bad things, and he's trying to learn from it. And he's been trying to protect me ever since, making sure I don't go down the wrong path. And so yeah, my days spent with my dad were pretty nice, me and him, and just ramen, just trying to figure out what we're doing. And okay, then after I hung out with my dad, back to my mother's side, and this is where I remember, so during close to my middle years when I was 10, 11, 12-ish, so this is a couple years after, I started to hang out with some friends that I would not consider friends right now, because these were probably the worst influences I've ever had in my life. They, my mother never really cared for me, so I didn't really feel any sympathy from her. Like, whenever I came home from school, she'd be like, oh, hey, jump in, and just whatever. And then there are times she'd actually forget me at school, so I would be at school like probably until 8 o'clock at night, 9, and then she'd come and be like, oh, I forgot, dear, I'm sorry. And I'm just like, what the hell is this, And the friends I started hanging out with because of her, I don't think it was because of her, but I probably just got drawn to them because I was like, what do? I don't have any friends. I want to hang out with someone. I want to be noticed. So I started hanging out with these guys, and I hung out with a couple older guys. I think, yeah, they were way older than me. Not way older, but just a couple years older than me, and they were really bad influence. I remember him. It was this guy and his sister. We'd go out and do really terrible things. There got to a point in my life where, I was kind of just sad, and I just didn't know what to do. I didn't have my father with me, so I didn't know what to do. My mother just didn't care at all. I was starting to really flunk school a bit. And these guys I hung out with, they taught me some really terrible things. The guy I was with, we did some really, I remember some vivid things that were just really awkward. I don't even know what the heck happened, but one of the memories I remember is that there came a time when me, him, and his sister, we'd go just walking on the streets because we didn't know what to do, and we found a cigarette on the ground, and we actually smoked out of it. Like, I don't know what happened. I don't know how low or depressed I got in my life, but I do remember that. It's a powerful image that I still have in my mind that I cannot get rid of. But they I remember they picked it up. I think one of them had a lighter, and then we just started smoking with that. I took one puff, and I was like, what the? And I think I choked a little bit off it, and I just never touched it again while they puffed the whole entire thing. And eventually, eventually after a couple months, I just left them, and I was like, I can't be going down that. I can't be doing things like that. It just didn't feel right for me. So after that incident, I was still living with my mother, and I felt like the memories I remember was that I pretty much gave up in life. I started to go to school, but then I kind of just left class at times, go to the bathroom and just leave the school actually. And then there are also times where I just didn't even want to go home, because eventually in the middle years, closer to the end of the middle years, my mother, she started to be home more often, but she started to be more strict with me. She started to do things that were not motherly. Whenever I actually got to visit her at home, she'd actually physically abuse me, and she'd hurt me a lot. I still remember some things she would do. There were times when she did take off all my clothes and started doing really bad stuff. She would physically hurt me at times, and I even remember she even got out a razor and started shaving off my eyebrows and everything just to make me look bad or whatever. I don't even remember. I just remember that memory where she was just like, I'm just gonna do this to you, and I'm like, what the hell? And I feel like that's why my eyebrows are still really huge to this day. It was all because of her. Like, I could have just had regular eyebrows, but she shaved them all off and started like abusing me. And I still remember I had a couple cuts from the razor too, because I didn't want it to happen. But she also cut me in the leg. It was my left leg, and there's still a little tiny gash from it. It's not as big as it was before, but I do remember her cutting me there. And then I was really scared from that point on. So after a couple incidents like that, every time she just abused me, I completely just give up. So I would just not even go home. Because she lived in an apartment, and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm not going to even go home. So there were times and days where I would just walk out. I'd see the house, but I wouldn't even go to it. I'd just walk on the streets to some place. And the place I usually ended up hanging out was at this 99-cent store, 99 discount or whatever. And there was a clerk there that was a really cool guy. I usually hung out with him. He sold a bunch of cool stuff. Even though it was 99 cents, I remember him having a lot of BB guns and stuff. And me and him, he'd let me use them and be like, oh, dude, check this out. And I'm like, okay. And we play marbles and stuff. Those are the only times I remember actually doing anything fun. Besides that, living with my mother was a complete hell for me. I didn't really have any fun. I felt like I was dying on the inside. I was having major depression. And yeah. So after a couple years, I got to go back with my father. And my father, he was worried about me. He was concerned. Same with my grandparents and my aunts and everyone. Whenever they saw me come over, they'd be like, what happened to you, because physically they could tell right away that something was wrong, and I didn't want to tell them, and because I felt scared, because if I told them, then if they yelled at my mother, then I would just get physically more abused if I had gone back. So I was really scared, and my father asked me about my grades, and he knew everything was up. Like, I was failing everything. I was just in depression, and I had nothing to do. I didn't even know what to do. So eventually, my dad got really mad and pissed off. He was just like, you know what? He can't take this. It's my own child, and he cannot be going down this path. And my father still didn't know about, like, you know, the smoking incident or any of the physical abuse incident. He just knew that something was going on. So what happened was he issued another court, or a trial, I guess, I don't know, jury trial, and put it against my mother. And what this trial was, that if my father was able to help me with my grades, make sure I get my grades up, I'll be able to live with them. And if I don't, then it doesn't really matter where I stay. So, you know, it ended up like that. I lived with my father for a long time. He helped me out every single day. He'd make sure I read 30 minutes a day. Whenever I visit my grandparents, they'd always tell me stories and tell me what I should be doing. And eventually, throughout the whole years, I started to learn how to actually study, how to actually not skip out in class, understand a little bit that school is a little important. You should learn how to do that. And so a couple years passed, and I started to learn stuff. And eventually, I started to understand what was going on. I started to realize that, you know, some of the things I've been doing were way wrong. I can't revert those things that I've done, but I can just try and live on and see what happens, you know. And now we're just gonna skip to high school. And now we're in high school. My mother and father, you know, there's a bunch of controversial. She tried to issue another, I believe, 2 more court trials just to bring me back, and we were able to win. My dad was able to win, so I lived with my father. And so, you know, high school was a blast for me. I love that. It was probably the only time I ever smiled. I don't think ever in my middle school or elementary school I ever smiled. If you ever see any of my pictures, I probably had a straight face and was just probably really cold inside. But high school, I eventually started to meet some really good friends, some really best friends to this day that helped me a bit. They were really good students. Some of them went to Harvard, and they're really awesome people. But as I'm going through high school, you know, I start to get some texts from my mother, really inappropriate texts actually. And by inappropriate, I don't mean like, how do I mean? By inappropriate, I mean like very disturbing to see. These were pictures I'm starting to get from her that were a representation of death. Or, you know, I was getting pictures of dead people. I was getting pictures of people being burned alive. I was getting these really disturbing pictures, and it was really making me uneasy. I started to tell a couple of my friends about it. I never told my parents yet, and they were like, dude, you should tell your parents, tell the police or something, you know, this doesn't seem right. And I'm like, okay. And eventually I told my parents, and they all freaked out. They were like, what the heck? And the person that freaked out the most was probably my aunt. She was extremely worried at this point. She was like, do you know what the psychopath could do to you? And I'm like, I don't know, you know, because like I've seen what I've seen and felt what she's done to me, and it does not feel pleasant. And I was really worried when she started sending those. And so in the middle of my high school years, my dad put me on childcare and protection against her in case anything happened. And eventually we started putting all these pictures to a local so we went to a local police station, and in which they'd store all these pictures that she'd be sending me as evidence, you know, in case something bad were to happen to me. Really scary part of my life. And, you know, throughout the whole year, I'd still, because of the court jury, I forgot about this detail, but in the court, even though my dad had won, I still have to visit my mother because I was under the age of 18 to visit her at least a week or so on some kind of vacation. And whenever I got to visit her in my high school, she never really did anything to me, per se. All my parents and grandparents were always scared whenever I went over there. My grandmother was really afraid. I felt like she was gonna get a heart attack or something, because she freaks out every time I get back. Like, she's so worried that something bad might happen to me. But whenever I visit her, my mother, on vacation stuff, she'd really do nothing. I'd go over there and she'd go to work, and my vacation was being locked up in a closet, technically. Like, that was all I remember. I even took pictures of this closet and showed them to my dad, and from that, there was one last court jury case in which helped me end it all, but it was after I took pictures of the closet, but I'll explain that later. So yeah, but she'd always lock me up, and I never really get to do anything. And you know, being locked up in a dark room that's very small and doing nothing, it kind of gets to you at times. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to you. Those weeks were probably the longest weeks of my life. It felt like years for me, and then I'd eventually be able to go back to my dad. And continue on with high school. You know, there were a couple of fun incidents that happened in high school. You know, I went to a bunch of proms, so we're just gonna skip past where, you know, just gonna ignore a bit of the mother, father, son relationship, and we're just gonna go a bit to more fun stuff about my high school, and then see how it all crashed a bit. But yeah, you know, let's talk about just a little bit, just off topic a bit, but some fun stories. But yeah, I started going to dances. Some people started showing me like what the fun is. I started talking to people like these two girls, Michaela and Katrina. They helped me quite a bit. Michaela helped me learn how to rollerblade. I was like, if you had known me back then, I was scared of everything. I was terrified of roller coasters. I was terrified of rollerblading. I was terrified of doing anything. Like, anything that involved the outside world, I was scared of because I wasn't used to it. I was like, what is this madness? Because usually I was being locked up or in a room with nothing to do, and I just didn't understand it. And so, you know, people started helping me out, and eventually I started building my confidence. I started to like roller coasters more, thanks to my cousin. I started to rollerblade, and thanks from a couple of my good friends. They also, because of rollerblading, I started to learn how to ice skate instantly. I started to snowboard, and you know, I started to do a bunch of cool stuff. And then, you know, it was just a great time. I also started going to dances, and some of these dances were probably the funnest, or the most fun things I've ever done in my life. I remember, here's a little thing, when I asked someone out, or asked someone to go to the dance, she already knew what I was gonna ask her. I believe a couple of my friends, they were talking about it, and like a couple girls like I talked to probably told her about it, and it was like, dang it, because I felt like she knew. But what I did was I made a song on the guitar, and in which I sung this, and it was a way to ask her to junior prom. And I couldn't find a place to do it. You know, I'd practice a lot, and I'd be like, oh crap, where do I do this? And the only time I did it was, I was like, because I didn't have any classes with her, but I'd hang out with her a lot, and I was really nervous. And eventually I got up the courage, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. So I brought my guitar to lunch, and it felt pretty obvious because she was just smiling the whole time, like she knew something was up, and everyone else was just like, oh, what's gonna happen? And I eventually sung to her, and I was like, hey, do you want to hear a cool song I made? She's like, oh sure, yeah. So then I started singing, and she just started having this cute, really cute smile, and just, oh man, it was pretty embarrassing because I was singing in the lunchroom with everyone staring at me, and I'm just like, oh gosh, what if I screw this up? And then it eventually worked out, and I went on we went on a date, went to prom. It was a lot of fun. It's really cute. I might show you guys a picture of it sometime, maybe on my Twitter, if you guys want to ask me for it. But if you guys remember, guys usually get that little thing on their chest, that whatever they're called, and then, you know, guys get the thing on their wrist. I don't even know what they're called, corsages or whatever. And what she did was she handmade hers, which is the coolest thing ever. I still have it today, and it's just the most gorgeous thing ever that she handmade it. But yeah, I remember that. So that was a lot of fun. And we're just gonna skip over to my senior year. Oh yeah, all 4 years I did track and field, cross country. Senior year was pretty fun. I did a lot of hurdles, and I was probably the shortest hurdler. I'm only 5'4", but I kill lots of people at hurdles. You know, people that are like 6 foot, they're like, what the heck is this little freaking Asian kid doing? And I'm just like, oh, well, you're gonna see this. So I show them off out like regional and stuff, and it's just a great time. And well, my senior year went really great. I also performed quite a bit on my guitar. I made a ton of new friends. Most of them are just amazing people. And eventually I started to reach graduation. So this is now we're going to kick back to the story with all the relationships and stuff. So graduation, things are starting to hype up. I'm pretty excited. I'm making a graduation song and I'm really happy. But what happens is that I start getting texts from my mother. She's like, oh, hey, I'm going to be at your graduation, I'm like, oh, hey, that's not bad. Actually something my mother will recognize me for. And I'm like, okay, dude, I can deal with this. If she's coming to support me, I'm fine with that. And then she said, a couple texts later, she was like, I'm gonna pick you up. And I'm just like, what the fuck? The hell is going on? I was just like, what the heck's going on? I'm like, no, thank you. And the reason why she's gonna pick me up is, part of the, the jury thing. Once again, there's a contract in which I have to visit both my mother and father. At least a bit, depending on who I'm living with. So since I'm living with my father, I have to visit my mother for some time. And the thing is, I can't decide where I get to do it or if I choose to go. And the reason is because I'm not an adult yet. So this was the year where I'm going to turn 18, but I haven't reached that key number yet. So they technically call me a little kid. So I can't decide what I get to do. And in this contract, I was supposed to go with my mother for 2 weeks. And it was supposed to be after graduation a week later, but she's trying to get me now, and that was illegal. And so I told my father about this, and we're like, okay, we got to think of some stuff to do. And there's a lot of controversy. My aunt helped me a lot on this, and my dad and uncle. And so, we're going to skip over to graduation, and, graduation, fun time. Oh, it was great. Everyone had their amazing speeches. One of my good friends, he had a speech complaining about all the construction at our school and just totally dissed the principal because he was pretty bad. Great time. Good time. Principal was pretty shocked, but because he was like a 4.0 chief student and stuff, but it was great. And eventually, so after graduation, we're all walking out, gonna go get our diplomas, return our outfits and stuff. And I'm just outside, and the first person I see, of course it's my friends, but my cousin's the first one to greet with me. He's just like, hey, how you doing, man? And it's like, dude, I don't know how I feel, because he doesn't graduate until 2 weeks later, because his school is a bit later and our school started earlier, but so yeah. And I was just hanging out with them. Eventually I saw my parents, and then I saw my mother. Well, not really, I'm joking, I didn't see my mother, but I saw someone that was apparently related to her. So before my mother came here, so a quick thing about my mother is that, quick information, she dropped out of middle school. She was struggling in middle school, she never passed. She's a real shorty. She tends to hire other people to do things for her. And so after I visited with my parents, we started to see this old man start approaching us, and we're just like, okay, what's going on? And instantly, the moment he approaches us, he starts swearing at my stepmother and starts this fight, and I'm just like, what the hell? What is going on? And I see this huge fight just break out. They're just arguing the heck out of each other. And then, like, my mother, what he was trying to say was like, hey dude, your mother's at the bottom of the steps waiting for you. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Dude, if she wants to see me, then come see me. Don't make me come to her. Like, I didn't understand. Like, she was that cold. Like, she doesn't even care about me. She's just like, oh, come here, dude. And I'm just like, what the heck? It's like the most stupidest and annoying thing ever. And my aunt finally found my aunt and uncle, and they saw us arguing, and they came and barged in. It was like, what the hell are you doing? And my uncle's a buff dude, so he like got him off. And what we did was, it was my aunt that instantly took me. She grabbed my hand and she was like, okay dude, we're gonna go. We're gonna get your diploma, we're gonna get you out of here. And I'm like, alright. And so there's also a quick little detail, but there's this after party, graduation party eventually later throughout the day, but keep that in mind. And now just back to here. So I went to go get my diploma, And what we did was, my aunt was like, okay, she's gonna be down at the bottom steps, so we're gonna go around the other way. So this felt like a little mission in a way, but pretty much what we decided to do was, my mother, father, and little brother, they're gonna go in their car, and then I was gonna go with my aunt, and my aunt was gonna take me to her house. And my dad said it'd be better if I stayed at her house for a couple hours, because most likely, since my mother is here in town, some shit's gonna stir up. So eventually I went with my aunt. We went out. We went through a different detour. It was a bit longer walk, but we got out that way, and I stayed at her house. And a couple hours later, I was just hanging out with my cousin, we're just talking about it, and he's just like, what are we gonna do? And I'm like, I don't know. So we're trying to just make the best out of it. And then eventually I started getting texts from my father, and in which my dad told me a little bit about it. He was with his uncle, or my uncle, and they were just driving it, and the first words he said was, "Oh shit, dude, is that 3 cops at our door?" And I'm like, oh god. And the way he told me was like, he looked over at my uncle and was like, oh god, dude, oh god. And she started this huge mess. There's a bunch of cops at our door, and apparently many things happened. She was trying to get me to go with her back to Fresno, and she was like, you know what, it's part of the contract, and the contract says I'm not supposed to go with her until a couple weeks later. So she was being an absolute idiot as always, and so frustrating. And it started to do a lot of fuss, and then eventually I was able to go home because I can. It was after when the cops left, though. The cops said they're gonna be back on this certain date, and that was the day where she had to pick me up. And of course, that's a couple weeks later, because my dad showed the officers the contracts, showing it, she's kind of stupid, kind of dumb. She's not allowed to do this yet. It's illegal. So yeah, helped me out a bit. And when I got home to my father, so this is when I actually learned about all that stuff, when he told me. And when he told me about all this, I was really pissed off and ticked off. I instantly called my mother and just started swearing my head off at her. I was beyond pissed, beyond humanity. I was really mad because she's causing all this trouble, and we've had all our neighbors have pretty much moved except one neighbor from our house, because the constant police officers coming to our house, it's happened many times. It's not just once, it's happened many times, and it's really frustrating. And so when I got home, yeah, of course, my dad told me, and I was on the phone and I was yelling at her, and eventually she started yelling back and started saying that I was a useless piece of shit and that I will be going with her no matter what I say. And after I heard that, I was ticked off the world. Holy heck, dude, I was so pissed. I just threw my phone into the wall, and it pretty much broke the wall. And I was just so mad. And the only thing I remember after that was that I was just in tears. I was just crying after that. I didn't even do anything. I was just crying. I was just so lost and pissed off. And my dad was comforting me. And the thing is, by the way, it's like 2 hours left until the after party, graduation party. So yeah. But yeah, I was really pissed off at this point. I was like, oh, I don't even want to go to the party anymore, I started talking with my dad, and he's just, you gotta go, man. You gotta go. You gotta have some fun. It's your graduation. You can't let your own mother let you be this depressed on graduation. It should be one of the most happiest moments in your life. It cannot be like this. And surprisingly, graduation was probably one of my saddest days ever, but also pretty enjoyable because of the after party. But yeah, so we're just gonna skip over now to the graduation party. It was pretty much just a sports party. People were just playing sports all night, and we didn't go to bed until probably 4 a.m. or so. It was a lot of fun. It was fun playing with a ton of my friends because I was never gonna see some of them ever again. And okay, we're gonna skip the after party because you guys don't need to hear that. I mean, there was like a magician. No, what are they called? The guys that can control people's minds, whatever. They had one of those, but that was it. But we're gonna skip that now. Now we're gonna go on to 2 weeks after. 2 weeks after, cops show up at our house, and we're like, okay, of course. And the cops were just for guaranteed that I was supposed to go with her. I wanted to resist, but I couldn't. I told the cops that I didn't want to go with her, and I explained to them what happened and why I didn't want to go. And they said there's nothing they can actually do. They said as part of the law, we cannot break the law. We have to follow it. You have to do this. Survive. That's all I remember the cop saying. Like, this cop was really nice to me, but he was just like, just survive these 2 weeks. And it would never happen again. It's pretty much sucked. But yeah. I went with my mother, and I saw the old man again. He was driving us the whole way back to California. And this guy, I started to learn more about him throughout the trip. He got paid quite a bit from my mother, apparently. I think it was like $600 to drive my mother out there and then back. But he was only expecting apparently 3 days, and because I didn't want to go with her back that one day where she wanted me to go, that guy had to stay with my mother for an extra week or so. And he demanded that she get paid more, but my mom was just like, bullshit, I'm not gonna pay you. And you know, I felt really bad for the guy because he had to do a bunch of dirty work for my mother, and my mother just pretty much tossed him in the trash and was like, you know what, screw you. And when I saw her paying him, she told me that I'm paying this guy less. He's probably just gonna spend it on cigarettes and bullshit, so I'm just gonna pay him less. And I'm just like, are you freaking kidding me? This guy did all the dirty work for you, and you're gonna treat him like this? Like, that's not even worth. And I felt really bad for him, and eventually while I was over with my mother, I started telling my dad about all this stuff, and my dad had a bunch of connections too, and he started telling me that, yeah, we heard the same thing, that he was getting ripped off completely hard by my mother. And so my couple weeks living with my mother was interesting. She didn't necessarily do anything to me bad, which I was so glad. There were times where she tried to approach me, but by this time I had learned karate. I'd been doing karate when I was ever with my father. I did Kyushinryu, and whenever she got near me, I would always be prepared to do something to her. And there was a point where I nearly knocked her out, but I didn't. And I think she was scared to do anything to me ever since, because she finally saw that I was capable of actually doing something, which was really good. But you know, the 2 weeks she didn't really do anything to me, which was a huge shocker to me. I thought she was gonna do something, but she didn't. And eventually 2 weeks ended. I got back to my mother, and before my mother said anything, I just remember her last words was some swear words to my father and my mother, and then my dad didn't even care. He just rolled out the window and just ditched her, and we left. Yeah, that's beautiful. It's great. And yeah, I just hung out with my parents. It went on quite a journey, and I'm finally back. And that's pretty much it with my whole entire relationship with my mother and father. Because now I'm finally 18 by that point, and I finally don't have to deal with her anymore, and it's pretty much great. And life is going well now. It's going well. And pretty much that's it from my whole story until graduation, until after graduation, I guess. Man, that was a long time to explain it. But yeah, it's been a roller coaster. I have a ton of other stories that I could say, but they're not necessarily important. But I will say a couple things right now. When I visit with my grandparents, this was after the trip that I did with my parents after they picked me up, but I talked to my grandparents, and they told me everything ever since I was a child until now. And they told me that they knew my mother was bad from the start. And so now I'm going to tell you guys what happened behind the scenes, because I learned everything, and my dad didn't even know that I learned this until just a bit ago, and I told him about it, and he was like, oh crap, you actually do know. So my grandparents told me about when I was a child. When I was a child, I was living with a couple, I had a bunch of pets. I had a parrot, I had a dog. This dog was amazing, golden retriever. Mina was his name, and he protected me. My grandmother told me that this dog, Mina, protected me ever since I was a child. She told me that I'd probably be dead by the age of 2 weeks if it wasn't for Mina. My grandmother told me the story of when I was just in my little cradle. Mina was like a really smart dog, like very intelligent, very, very intelligent dog. And apparently, from what my grandmother told me, was that my mother was trying to do something to me in the crib, and Mina would go upstairs, scratch on the door and be like, hey, something's up, and my grandmother would be like, what's going on? And she'd come all the way down, and then the dog, took her to where I was. And pretty much, from my grandmother's perspective, she said that I was being choked by my own mother, apparently. I don't know how, or how twisted she was, but apparently that was what was happening. And from that point on, my grandmother, I found out that it wasn't my mother who put me in all the in the child department, where I get placed. It was my grandmother, the one looking out. She told me that she was the one who told me that I was gonna be placed in that. She can't have me being taken care of by my own mother. And so I learned that bit of information. That was extremely shocking. Another information I learned was that my mother really despised the other children, like all my other cousins. So my cousin Jake, even though he was born 2 weeks later, one of the memories that my grandmother told me was that when we were going through the door and stuff, she actually slammed the door on my cousin's hand, trying to break it, apparently. And my aunt, all I remember from my grandmother was that my aunt was apparently insanely pissed, and I believe they called it out on an accident, but it was like really red and almost broken. But there was that. So that bit I learned, so that clears up a bit of information. So I probably would have been dead by now if it wasn't for my grandparents and my dog that I lived with for a while. Another information is that I learned was about my parents' divorce, why they got divorced. So apparently my mother was an insane douchebag. Like, holy hell, I did not realize this. I mean, I did realize this, but this was just crazy. So apparently when my dad was in the shower, he left his check on the desk. He was just kind of like, he was really innocent, like just an innocent dad. He was just kind of like, it's great, I'm married, it's nice. And one day she takes her, I believe, his wallet or check or whatever, and what she does, I don't know exactly what she took, but she took it to the bank apparently and took everything from his bank and withdrawed all the money, because they're married technically, ownership, blah blah blah. But she took everything from my dad. She took all the money from his bank and then left him for dust. And what my grandmother told me was she could remember was that my dad was just crying for probably weeks, because he just completely lost everything. Everything he built up, he just lost it instantly. And it's all because of this one person. And so yeah, that's the reason why they got divorced. And that is also the reason why me and my dad had to live on ramen all those years, because there was actually nothing else we could afford. And we didn't even live at home. I remember we were just actually living at other people's places. But yeah, that's pretty much from what everything I've learned until now, all the things that's how it happened. That's how I remember it, and it's been a roller coaster. You know, I've gone through a lot. So yeah, that's pretty much it for my story, guys. I don't think I have anything else to say about my life story. That pretty much sums up everything from when I was born to now. And to be honest, there's been so many points in my life I could have died. Literally, like, just plain out dead. Physically dead. I would not be here talking to you guys. And it's pretty scary, you know? I knew there's just like so many things wrong, but I just didn't know how to react to it. And most of my life I've been living in fear, but you know, I don't have to worry about it anymore, so it's all good. But yeah, that's pretty much my entire life story, guys. You guys have been asking this for a long time, and I promised to do it, and I finally told you guys my life story. Hope you guys learned more about me, and I want to thank you guys once again. Thank you so much for 10K subscribers. I hope you guys don't take this story lightly. I mean, I've been through a lot, guys, and it really makes me mad when I don't see people who don't try. Like, they didn't go through anything bad in their life, but they just don't try in life, and it's just like, what are you doing? You know, it makes me mad. I want people to live their lives the way it should be, because I always tell everyone that, you know, your lives are like amazing right now. You should always go live it. Make sure you're always doing all the things you can be doing. And I always feel like it's always awkward for me to talk to people about, you know, our childhoods, because whenever I talk to people, they're like, oh yeah dude, I remember this time when we all hung out and did all this fun stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah. And I'd usually never say anything, but whenever they ask for my childhood, I'd be like, well, I didn't have a childhood. And usually things get really awkward and silent after that, and they'd be like, okay. And they never ask anymore, so yeah. You know, even though some of you guys might have shitty lives, some of them might be worse than mine, just make sure you can always, you will always be able to come back no matter how hard your life is. It might take more time to understand what's going on, but don't lose hope and don't lose faith. Make sure you always go forward, and make sure you have good people you're with. The people you hang out with, your family, make sure they're all good people. Make sure they help you, guide you on the right path. Because sometimes in my life, I was completely lost, and I probably would have stayed lost if I didn't have those kind of people. And yeah, right, that's my entire story, guys. Hope you guys learned something, and I'll see you guys later. Thank you guys so much for 10K subscribers. Sorry this couldn't have been a draw of my life, but if I had to draw this whole entire 48 minutes or so, I would have probably cried and died. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you guys later. Peace.